Well, Scott, welcome to Rev 2 of 160 Studios. Last time you were here, we were in our other studio.
Yeah, this is, it's good to be here, first of all, Joe. I always enjoy sitting down and having conversations with you. But this is impressive. It's amazing what you've done over the course of 5 years to build a platform for MedTech companies to tell the story of who we are as an industry, which, in my opinion, is not fully appreciated by the consumers or even by the healthcare system. And so we're grateful for your leadership in doing this, and this is impressive, so I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and we've got the voices like yourself and AdvaMed to certainly help sort of superpower that forward.
Yes.
You know, coming into 2024, what have you got your eyes on, and what's next for us? You've got a new division you opened up?
We did, yeah. So for those who don't know the trade association space, we've long been the medical device association primarily. It represented medical device companies in Washington and globally as well. But the industry has changed and evolved so much in the past 6 years, right? We wanted to make sure that we were making AdvaMed the home for all of MedTech and not just the traditional device companies. So we've gone through a series of expansions over the past few years. The last one, the most recent one, was at the end of this year. We acquired the Imaging Association and brought them into AdvaMed as well. So now we really cover everything that's MedTech or touches MedTech. And it's a really important thing for us to do, to unify the industry under one home, one umbrella. I often say now to folks who don't understand the industry, we're the backbone of the healthcare system. Nothing gets done in healthcare without us. Even biopharma relies on MedTech to get their medicines into patients oftentimes. And so we want to begin telling that story of who we are, the critical role that we play in the healthcare system, and the impact, frankly, it would have if the industry didn't prosper and innovate and succeed in the way that you and I both think is so important. So it's great to have the imaging companies here, and wow, the work that's going on in imaging, as you know, it's amazing.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about AI. I'm going to hit you up on that.
Yeah.
And you have the digital health division also?
Yep. Yeah, we launched that last year, and bringing in players not just in the traditional healthcare space, but also the IT companies that are now merging into the healthcare space. You know this, Joe, but there's health tech and there's med tech. That is now converging in a way that it's hard to distinguish between one and the other. And you've got traditional IT companies who are trying to get into the healthcare space. So we wanted to create a home for them as well. So we have the large players in the IT space. The Googles are there, Microsoft, Apple, all of those companies, and some of the newer players as well, who are coming in to talk about policy issues, business issues, solutions to healthcare problems, understanding how the regulated entities work in Washington as they're moving into this space. But the digital side of what's going on in MedTech is so important. And it's really in everything now, too. It's not just what you think of as traditional digital issues, right? It's in traditional MedTech products, medical device products, whether it's hips or knees or diabetes supplies or imaging. It just runs through it all. And so we wanted to make sure we had a home there for work to get done and collaborations to occur. And that's been really successful. We're excited about that as well. I'm
excited about that sort of segmentation as well for a number of reasons. You know, you look at the burden on our economy, right? It's 18% of our GDP. And with that, if you statistically look at over the last 30 years, there's been a 3,500% increase in administrative burden and only 150% increase in actual clinicians, docs. So that digital and the AI accompanied with that, I think that's where you're going to start to see AI and digital come in to lessen that administrative burden without sacrificing it and interconnecting all the analog world we have today.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that. I think it also is going to increase quality care, right, and outcomes associated with it as well. I know we're going to talk more about AI, but that term has become something that I think folks are concerned about, don't understand. And when you think about it in the context of healthcare, it can be a little bit scary if you don't understand it. But it's really about improving health outcomes, early diagnosis, better treatments, and health outcomes in a way that's going to be transformative for patients in the system. And to your point, on the front end of it and the back end of it.
So, you know, talking about transformative change, we're in an election year.
Yeah.
And with all the iterations and gyrations going on in Washington right now, potentially, what does that mean?
Means a lot of confusion, and it means a lot of dysfunction that probably continues for another year. It's hard to imagine we're not going to see a rematch of the presidential election this time around. You look at the polls right now, Trump has a huge lead. Mm-hmm. He won in Iowa in a historic way. Had a couple people on the Democrat side pop up and say they're going to challenge Biden, but they can't get traction on that side either. So unless something major happens, and in politics you never know, but it looks like a rematch of those two. So it's going to be a little bitter, a little bit of nastiness, I think, that's going to occur through the political process. One of the things that we try to do, though, Joe, is stay away from that as best we can. You have to understand it. You have to be a part of it because politicians make policy, right? So you can't ignore it entirely, but you can't get caught up in all of the nonsense that goes on the political side. You've got to cut through the brokenness of Washington and still find solutions to problems. And that's what we've been able to do for the last 8 years or so since I've been at AdvaMed, and do successfully. And we do that because we have great companies and we have a great industry to represent. So as we go through this election cycle, expect a lot of dysfunction, expect a lot of arguments and silliness that will occur, but you can also expect us to get things done in spite of it. So,
and one of the things too is every single one of those politicians have in common bringing back better health care to their constituents.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And when you talk to them and you explain what we do and the impact it has on the economy, their constituents and patients, most everybody agrees with us, right? You don't have a lot of partisan battles over issues that matter to us. Some we get caught up in a little bit because you can't completely stay out of the fray, but people understand, right? And the other thing, Joe, they're all patients too at some time in their life. And they all understand the need for quality care and access as well. And so when we tell our story and we talk about challenges, we tell it through that lens. They tend to understand it, and the politics goes away, right? So,
and with that, I don't want that to go untouched. The democratization of the quality of care is important. Our politicians have platinum plans, and they deserve it.
Right.
Okay. But not every person in the United States has access to health care.
Right. Right.
And I know your organization does a tremendous job on that as well.
Right. Access is the key, right? We don't want to get caught up in how you provide that access, necessarily what the cost of that access is, what the role government plays versus the private sector plays. But we want to make sure everybody has access, right? Access to a healthcare system, but not just health insurance, right? Access to innovative technologies that impact their lives as well. That matters. Oftentimes in politics, what you see is people who say, we want them to have access to a doctor or a nurse or a hospital when they get sick, but they may not be inclined to cover the things that could cure or treat the disease that they have. That part of access is critically important. It does you no good to have a lousy insurance product if you can't get the technology you need to save your life. And so it's connected in a way that people need to understand, and it's the story that we often tell. So,
one of the things I want to touch on today, because I know it's been an issue swirling underneath the surface in MedTech, and most people don't really know about this, even the players in it, but the subject around ETO and sterilization. Right. That's become a very quiet hot potato that I think could have as much of an impact as the supply chain we went through during the pandemic. Tell me what you're doing on that.
Yeah, so EPA came out with a proposed regulation to regulate facilities that sterilize medical products using ethylene oxide. It was a really bad proposal, right? I mean, the reality is it struck me as more of a proposal that was designed to pacify the concerns of the environmental justice community. And I'm not saying that in a way to disregard the importance of the environment, but you can't think about the environment without thinking about the impact it has on patients, right? They're connected, right? And EPA came out with a regulation under this administration that went way too far. The result of that would have been unquestionably a shutdown, a massive shutdown of sterilization facilities across the nation, which would have led to unquestionably a massive shortage. Patients don't stop suffering when EPA rolls out a regulation that stinks, right? So they need to understand the impact it would have. The good news, Joe, though, is this. They have begun to understand it. And we've had any number of meetings, probably 10 or 15 meetings with senior leaders inside EPA just in the last few months. I met with the EPA administrator recently and had a conversation with him as well. Very good conversation. To be honest with you, he looked at me and said, I'm not sure I fully understood the impact of this on the medical sector, and we're going to have to do something about that. So we expect within the next month or so, the final regulation will come out, and there are 4 or 5 things in there that my sense is they're going to get right or better than the original rule was, that will allow us to keep operating and continue to sterilize these products. You can't afford a shortage. And the other thing I'll say is FDA, who regulates, obviously, the vast majority of our products and regulates the sterilization process, they identified it as a problem early, too. So they've been a great advocate inside the administration to say, if you go forward with that rule, it's not just industry saying it, it's the regulators saying it, it's going to be disastrous. Now, the good news is I don't think it's going to be a disaster. I think we've fixed that in a way that'll be workable, and it's, let's wait and see. But it's good news, and it's moving in the right direction, I think.
And that's an exact example of why AdvaMed is so important on behalf of the MedTech, health tech industry and the public at large, right? Because most people would not have identified that as an issue.
Yep.
And then that's one of those longitudinal issues that when you take that downrange, I'll say it means deaths.
Yeah.
It means a bigger payload on the healthcare system. It means infections, right?
Yeah.
It means equipment not available.
Right.
And then therefore people are going to suffer.
Yeah. And the average politician is going to miss that, right? And that's why, I mean, we have a great team. Greg Christ on our team led this work along with Janet Trunzo, our head of regulatory, and really drove this early. We've been on it for 5 years. And the previous administration began to bubble up. In this administration, they put out the rule. But we've been working on this for 5 years. And had we not, it would have been really bad for the healthcare system. And then you'll see people going, wait, what happened? Why are we having these problems, right? Well, we told you. Regulations matter, policy matters to patients at the end of the day. So we're proud of where work we've done, and I think where we're going to land.
Yeah, and thankful for that, because unpacking policy after it's set is a lot harder than influencing it, especially in DC.
Yeah, you saw that with the medical device tax.
Yes, we did.
Right? A lousy policy that had a very negative impact on innovation, and it took a long time to completely unpack it, through a couple delays, and finally when we got it done, then we got a nice little bounce, right? Not to the pocketbooks, but to the patients who benefit from new innovative products. And that's why policy matters.
So talking about Washington while we're at it, what could possibly occur if we went through a government shutdown?
Yeah, it's always disruptive. So a worst case scenario is that the products that are going through FDA and CMS would just shut down, right? So if you've got an application pending at FDA until the shutdown ends, you're not going to get any work done on that. So if you're halfway through your process, it could take you 2 or 3 times as long to get the product approved. If you're in a conversation with CMS about how they're going to reimburse it, whether they're going to cover it, if there's no government funding, that means you're not going to get a decision. That drags it out further. The impact that has on the markets is very, very negative, right? So we want to do everything we can to keep that from happening. I feel like we're going in the right direction. You have these things that happen, right? They run up to a deadline, everybody freaks out, they realize what they've done, and they figure out a way to fix it. But the problem is they only fix it on a temporary basis, right? We need to get back to the world where you have some continuity and some predictability in the appropriation cycle so that we're not doing this at the end of every year and scrambling, right? That's the most important thing. And, the new speaker says that's where he's going. I just don't know if he has a caucus that he can control to help get, more consistency into the process. But we have a shutdown looming. Joe, you and I are sitting here today. This weekend, it may shut down, it may not shut down. My sense is it probably will not, and they'll work out something this weekend to extend it through February. But then we're going to come back again later in February to have another conversation about this. So let's hope it doesn't happen, and if it does happen, it's hopefully really short term.
Agreed, and not just the shutdown on the FDA, which then trickles back. It's the butterfly effect, right? Then it hits venture, because now you can't have your startups who are waiting for their 510 or their PMA or their IDE.
Right.
Clinical trials are slowed down because you're burning through all kinds of cash. It affects investment market, and then eventually public markets, and eventually private equity. So the economic hit on that as well as to the patient, because you can't put that device to the patient quickly.
we need to bring you to Washington to tell that story because not very many people understand that, right? They understand the piece that they understand, but they don't understand the connectivity between all of those aspects of getting a product to market and what government funding, government policy does to each of those phases, right? Again, it's just not the FDA, as you said, right? It's the entire process, and you articulated it better than I do, Joe. So we're gonna bring you up to DC and turn you into an advocate for MedTech.
Boy, that would be I got to check with my chief marketing officer if she'll let me do that.
It'll be fun. It'll be quite an experience for you. So.
For sure. I'll take your coaching on it. So on the subject, we touched on it earlier, of AI.
Yeah.
You know, I'm fascinated with this subject. And to your point, the public is fearful of it and deserves to be.
Right.
But there are aspects of AI right now that we've had in play for years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And FDA has been regulating AI in some form for a number of years, too. I think 20, 25 years. When people think of AI now, they think of chat GPT and robots and all kinds of other things that are a little bit scary. But AI in healthcare is just designed really to get better outcomes for patients, right? Earlier indications of disease. I think that's where a lot of the promise lies, right? When you use AI-enabled technologies, you can diagnose things earlier. When you diagnose things earlier, that means treating things earlier. And as a result of that, you're saving a lot of lives, right? And so that's AI to us. And as you said, it's been regulated for a long time. One of the things that concerns me about AI from a policy standpoint is that as policymakers look at it, as regulators look at it, they don't have a knee-jerk reaction to over-regulate it and over-control it in a way that would slow down innovation. And that's what we're working on right now. The first phase of advocacy is always education, right? Helping people understand what this means to, in our case, medical technology companies and the specific technologies and the value it provides. When they understand that, you tend to get better outcomes. If you're not educating, you can end up with some really bad policy outcomes that really slows down innovation. But you know this, Joe, from your tours around MedTech companies and around the globe, the speed at which AI is integrating into MedTech is pretty lightning, right? And government policies aren't lightning speed, and they're not always innovative. And that's what we need to balance, that we get that right.
And it's really important because the majority of AI today, constructively, without much harm, or any harm for that matter, is used in imaging.
Yeah.
And I think imaging enters into nearly 80% of patient visits.
Yeah, that's right.
And if we can put a machine eyes on it versus human eyes, we're able to scale better. We're able to bring diagnostics to underserved markets and underserved population.
Right.
And we're able to intervene earlier and keep it from being catastrophic. So that's really important.
Yeah, it is. The other thing is the cost associated with it. Oftentimes, people who do budgets look at the front-end cost. But think about the midterm and long-term costs associated with early detection as a result of AI. Not only do you save lives, but you save a lot of money if you intervene early. And you're not dealing with long, difficult healthcare chronic challenges as well. So there's a savings associated with this as well that I'm not sure everyone understands, but needs to.
Yeah, we got to get them to spend just a day. I think everybody up on the Hill needs to spend a day and sort of get an education on this impact of decisions that we make, because I think they only get to see, because they're busy, you know, level 1, maybe level 2 if they really care.
Right.
But really looking at the longer reach involved.
Yeah, that's right.
You've got a couple big events coming up this year.
We do.
And these are must attends for those that can. And the first one is the CEO Summit, which I think is one of the most powerful pound for pound that there is in MedTech. Yeah,
it's a fantastic event. I mean, every CEO who's in the industry is invited and or comes to the event, right? So we have a great turnout. Every large CEO, every large company CEO, strategics, they're all there. And as a result of that, the small and mid-sized companies want to be there as well to, you know, have conversations, informal and sometimes formal, that lead to future collaborations, right? But it's also just a good time to get together with people you know and you've been working with. You learn from each other. You have time to talk offline. You have informal times as well that are fun. CEOs need to have a little bit of fun too, right? They work really, really hard. And so it's a really fun event. And we have, you were there in the past, we have some really interesting speakers that come every year. And the lineup this year is going to be particularly compelling, I think. And we're kicking off the general sessions on Tuesday with Mark Zandi, who's the chief economist for Moody's. He's going to talk about the trends in the economy, the challenges he sees, what the next few years looks like. That's going to be very helpful. Then we have a patient and a leader and a celebrity athlete that's going to follow. Martina Navratilova is going to join us. She'll have a session as well. Then in the afternoon, we have Bob Lighthizer, who's the former head of USTR, U.S. Trade Rep. He's going to come in and talk about global politics, global policies, trade wars, some of the challenges we see with China as well. And then it's an election year, right? So we're going to end with David Axelrod, which was Obama's campaign manager, and Karl Rove, Bush's campaign manager. The last two campaign managers that led re-elects as well for successful politicians. And they're going to talk about the state of politics, the presidential election, what's going on in Congress right now. And that'll be fun, right? We'll have a lot of fun with that conversation as well. So it's going to be a great day, and we have a dinner before, dinners afterwards, and a lot of fun to be had. So I look forward to being there. Look forward to seeing you there too.
And your speakers are amazing because they're not there performatively for their opponents.
Right.
And the conversations and the dialogue they have are usually pretty free.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And I think that's important.
Yeah, it is. No media, right? Doors are closed.
Right.
People feel free to ask the questions they want to ask. We ask our moderators to ask tough questions too, right? Not just softball stuff, right? So let's get into a little dialogue. Keep the mind engaged, and people enjoy it. And oftentimes I've found, Joe, when you bring in current politicians or current administration officials, they get on the talking points down the right, and you're like, I'm not sure there's a lot of value there. Right. But if you bring in the formers, like Bob Lighthizer, it's going to be fun, right? He's going to tell you what he thinks, and he's going to tell you things you wouldn't hear from people who are in now. And that's the part of the conversation that I think everyone enjoys.
I agree. And then the big one, the MedTech conference.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So I'll say it. You'll probably I want this to be the next JP Morgan for MedTech.
Yeah. It's a great event. It's always been a good event, a very solid event. But the future, I think, is really bright for us on this conference. Joe, you and I have talked about the JP Morgan component of it before, and we're making real good strides in getting all the investment community to come there and show up and be a part of the conference. Informal meetings, formal meetings, and presentations as well. Reverse pitches that we do have been really fun and engaging for a lot of folks. Small and mid-sized companies learn a lot from larger companies and how they're managing their issues. But the other thing I really want to do is not only make it a JP Morgan event, but make it a CES-like event, a Consumer Electronics Show as well, where there's a lot more touch and feel of technologies, emerging technologies that are coming to market that consumers may have access to in the future, showcase opportunities in different disease states so companies can talk about what's coming. So the average patient, average consumer can get a better understanding of who we are and what we do. Because as you know, when you start to learn more about each of these technologies and how it impacts people's lives, it's exciting, right? And it can be just as exciting and just as fun as going to CES, but on a different scale, obviously, right? And so we want to have more of the showcase feel of a CES or the investor component that goes along with the JP Morgan, and then the foundational work that we do on policy and regulatory and payment advice that so many companies get, and the networking is, as you know, fantastic. So we're in Toronto this year. It's our first international event just across the border. But Toronto is a great city. I know you've been there a number of times. It's a fun city to attend. It's a good city to do an event in. There's a robust MedTech community in Toronto as well. So we're excited about this event. And eventually we'll be back in Boston and back in San Diego. But we're all going to rally in Toronto this year.
And I love to see that visionary leadership that you have, because when we think about a CES type product, the movement of hospital to hospital at home, right? We've got, I think, again, that 18% GDP, 80% of that is the managed chronic care,
right,
which is also where most of the money is spent.
Right.
And that can be managed at home.
Right, that's right.
Right, so those organizations also kind of bring in the cool consumer sexy stuff, right? The sensor driven, the wearables, obviously, as well as the core hard tech, deep med tech products.
Right, that's right. Yeah, we were at CES this year, exhibiting there and talking about what we do in that space as well, and so we'll pull that back into our event as well. But you're right, there's so much to see and feel and touch that we need hospitals and docs to be there too, so they can experience it as well, because there's so much collaboration that occurs. So I think the future is really bright. You don't build it overnight. It's going to take us a number of years to get there. But that's where we're heading, and it's a great time in MedTech.
Yep. So as we close out today, what's your hopes for 2024?
Yeah, let's see. I mean, I think you look at it from where I sit. You look at it from two different perspectives. If you look at it from the perspective of what we want for medtech companies, we want a strong growth year. We want to make sure that the economy is sound and solid, so people will invest. You hope to see more activity in the acquisition space, more M&A activity, more partnership activity that will develop in 2024. And it feels like, Joe, it feels like we're trending in that direction. Then I think of the other side, which is the policy and regulatory side. What do we want to see in 2024? We want to make sure there's not a bad regulation on ETO, and I think we're trending in the right direction. We'd like to see the administration roll out a new regulation on coverage of innovative technologies that's very good. We would like Congress to act on that as well and make it statutory so new innovative technologies get covered early. Not only good for patients, but it's good for the entire ecosystem as well. We've got some work we're doing in the diagnostic space to make sure that there's a level playing field for every company that's in the diagnostic space that will improve safety and efficacy of diagnostic products. And then you and I talked about AI just a minute ago. We want to make sure that Congress doesn't do the wrong thing on AI and facilitates the growth of AI in a way that will really benefit patients in the industry. So you want the markets and the economy to be sound so that companies naturally grow, and you want policies to support that. And when the two line up, it'll be great for MedTech, great for patients, great for the healthcare system. And I feel really good, to be honest, about 2024. I don't think you'll see transformative policies, but I think you're going to see policy advances that really help the industry and set us on a strong footing for the next 5 or 10 years.
Well, Scott, thank you for your leadership. Thank you and your team for paving the way. I don't think enough MedTech companies and players in healthcare understand that, and they need to dig a little further into the mission you're on.
Yeah, we love to have everybody there because it's the place, the primary place where business gets done, networking gets done, deals get done, and we're excited about the future, and we appreciate all you've done to support not only MedTech broadly, but AdvaMed as well. You're a great partner, Joe, and it's great to be with you.
Happy to be there, my friend.
All right, good.
I'm Joe Mullings from 160 Studios. Be well.